Rise of the Bonemancer, Chapters 1 to 30. Chapter 1. The day Bones answered, no one expected anything from Max. That was the problem. He stood at the back of the awakening plaza with the other 15-year-olds, hands clenched tight inside his sleeves to hide the shaking. Stone spires rose around them like the ribs of a dead god, etched with runes older than the city itself. Above, the sky churned in slow, bruised spirals, a reminder that the world did not forgive weakness. This was the awakening ceremony, and it decided who mattered. One by one, names were called. Lysa Turnfall. Fire erupted around her feet. Class awakened. Pyromancer, common cheers. Darren Holt, his skin hardened into iron. Class awakened. Iron-skinned warrior, uncommon applause. Max swallowed. He already knew what would happen when his turn came. Nothing. That was how it usually went. The class that shouldn't exist. Mux. The overseer didn't bother calling his surname. Max stepped forward anyway. The awakening circle pulsed beneath his feet, pale light crawling across its surface like something reluctant to wake. He closed his eyes and waited for the familiar emptiness. Seconds passed. Then the ground cracked. A sharp sound echoed across the plaza as fine fractures spider-webbed outward from the circle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Max's breath caught. Cold rushed up his legs, not the chill of air, but the deep, hollow cold of burial soil. Something answered. Error unknown. Class detected, rewriting classification parameters. Max screamed as pain tore through his spine. Not flesh structure. He felt every bone in his body vibrate, resonate, remember. The light in the circle dimmed, then turned the color of old ivory. Class awakened. Bonemancer. Unique status. First recorded. Instance authority granted. Skeletal binding growth condition evolution. Through conflict. Selens fell. No chairs. No applause. The overseer stepped back, face drained of color. Impossible, someone whispered. There's no such class, another said. Max dropped to one knee, retching, hands clawing at the stone as a new sensation settled into his chest space. Empty. Waiting. Bones beneath the plaza shifted. First summoned Max didn't know how he did it. He only knew that the emptiness inside him pulled. The stone at his feet shattered. A hand rose from below white, cracked, unmistakably human. Thin. Another. A skeleton clawed its way free of the ground, joints grinding softly as it assembled itself with unnatural precision. No flesh. No eyes. It knelt before Max. Skeleton summoned. Type. Basic bone servant. Rank. Primitive potential. Extreme. Screams erupted in the plaza. Guards drew weapons. The overseer raised his staff, voice shaking. Contain it. Kill the summoner if you have to. The skeleton turned its skull toward Max. Waiting. Listening. Max stared at it. Heart pounding. It's not attacking, he whispered. The system responded. Bone Servant Link established command range. Short growth path unlocked evolution conditions. Absorb combat experience. Incorporate higher quality bones. Survive destruction. Max's stomach twisted. Survive destruction. The skeleton tilted its head, as if Kudios. Fear of what comes next. The overseer's voice hardened. This ceremony is over. Detain the boy. Guards advanced. The skeleton rose smoothly to its feet, positioning itself between Max and the approaching soldiers. Crude, weak, but loyal. Max felt it then, the truth settling heavy in his bones. This wasn't a class meant to shine at awakening. It was meant to start small and become something terrifying later. End of Chapter 1. As Max was dragged away in chains, the skeleton followed, joints clattering softly. No one noticed the faint system message flicker one last time. Bone Servant record updated. Survival instinct. Developing. Chapter 2. Property of the Sanctum. Max learned quickly that chains didn't stop magic. They only told it where it was allowed to exist. Cold iron bit into his wrists as he was dragged through the underlevels of the Sanctum Citadel. The halls here were older than the city above, bone-white stone. Narrow arches and walls etched with prayer sigils, meant to suppress unstable awakenings. They burned, not his skin, his bones. Suppression field detected effect. Summon authority reduced. 70% warning. Prolonged exposure causes structural damage. Max gritted his teeth and stayed silent. His skeleton followed anyway. Not summoned. Remembered. Its bones scraped softly along the stone as it walked behind him, ignoring every ward as if it simply didn't recognize them. That scared the guards more than any spell could. Assessment: they locked him in a circular chamber lit by cold blue crystals. A dozen robed figures waited inside Sanctum arbiters, kingdom magisters, and one man in black armor, who didn't bother hiding the blade at his side. The Inquisitor. Max, said the High Arbiter, her voice smooth as polished bone. You will answer our questions truthfully. Max looked up. Or? The Inquisitor smiled. Or we erase the mistake. The skeleton shifted. The sound echoed far too loudly. The first lie. Bonemancer, the Arbiter said. That class does not exist in any record. It does now, Max replied quietly. A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Summon it again, she ordered. Max hesitated. The Inquisitor's blade slid an inch from its sheath. Max raised a shaking hand. The air grew heavy. The floor cracked. Another skeleton emerged, smaller, thinner, poorly formed. It collapsed almost immediately. Skeleton destroyed feedback received bone servant growth. +1. Max gasped as pain flared through his chest. The first skeleton straightened. Its bones looked denser than before. The magisters froze. Did it just? One whispered, grow. Another, finished. Weapon or threat, they argued openly after that. It's scalable, the magister said. With time and resources, it violates Sanctum law, snapped another. Raising the dead is forbidden. The High Arbiter raised a hand. Not raising, reassembling. There is a difference. Max's stomach sank. They weren't deciding if to use him. They were deciding how. The proposal the Arbiter turned back to Max. You will serve the Sanctum, she said. Under supervision, you will be trained, restrained, and deployed against our enemies. And if I say no, Max asked. The Inquisitor stepped forward. Then we kill you. Hey, side simp, and burn every bone you ever touched. The skeleton took a step forward. Every ward in the room flickered. The Inquisitor's smile faded. Erasure protocol. A magister whispered urgently. He's resisting suppression. The Arbiter's eyes hardened. Then we proceed with contingency. Runes ignited across the chamber. Erasure ritual initiated. Target. Unique class bearer outcome. Soul Shattermax screamed, not in fear. In fury. Something inside him answered. First act of defiance, the skeleton moved, faster than before. It leapt, bones shattering, reforming mid-air, slamming into the ritual array and ripping glowing sigils apart with bare hands. The backlash knocked everyone off their feet. Max felt it, every broken bone, every fracture. But instead of pain, growth, bone servant evolution. Triggered form. Reinforced skeleton trait gained. Damage adaptation, the skeleton rose again. Taller. Tiker. Harder. The Inquisitor drew his blade at last. This ends now, he snarled. Max staggered to his feet, eyes burning. No, he said. This is where you learn. End of chapter. Too deep within the Sanctum, alarms began to ring. Not invasion alarms, containment failure. And somewhere in the system, a quiet line of text appeared noticed by everyone except Max Uniclass. Confirmed. Bonemancer. Growth pattern. Exponential recommended action. Immediate. Termination. Chapter 3. The skeleton that chose the ritual chamber burned. Cracked runes spat sparks across the floor, suppression wards flickering in and out like dying stars. Guards lay scattered, some unconscious, some screaming as the magic backlash chewed through their armor. Max stood swaying at the center of it all. The world felt distant, muted. His skeleton as first stood in front of him. It had moved there without instruction. Not summoned, not commanded. It simply decided. Anomaly detected. Bone servant behavior. Autonomous response cause. Unknown. The skeleton raised its shield arm, once a rib cage, now fused and layered into a curved bone plate, and took the next spell full in the chest. The impact shattered half its torso. It didn't fall. Bone slid back into place with a grinding click. The skeleton took another step forward. Protective. Deliberate. Max's breath hitched. I didn't tell you to. The skeleton tilted its skull slightly. Then it advanced again. The Inquisitor who didn't strike steel rang as the last standing Inquisitor stepped between the skeleton and the remaining Enough, he barked. The chamber froze. Even the wards hesitated. This Inquisitor was older, scarred, his black armor etched with hundreds of kill marks. His blade remained sheathed. You'll kill him, one Magister hissed. Yes, the Inquisitor replied calmly. Or we'll lose him forever. He turned his gaze to Max. You don't belong in a cage, boy. Max laughed weakly. You noticed a different offer. The Inquisitor raised a hand, not in surrender, but in truce. Our lands are dying, he said. Nightmare creatures pour from the wilds faster than we can burn them away. Knights fail. Mages die. Sanctums fall. His eyes flicked to the skeleton, but bones don't break the same way flesh does. The room grew cold. Help us, the Inquisitor said. Hunt the nightmares. Learn how to kill them permanently, and in return. Max asked. The Inquisitor didn't hesitate. Whatever you want. Silence followed. Max felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Protection. Resources. A name that wasn't heretic. The skeleton's choice. Max didn't answer right away. He looked at the skeleton instead. It was damaged. Cracked. Scarred. Still standing. Still between him and danger. Not because it was ordered. Because it wanted her. That terrified him more than any threat. Bone servant status update trait developed. Guardian instinct note. This behavior cannot be suppressed. Max exhaled slowly. No, he said. The Inquisitor frowned. Think carefully. I am, Max replied. That's why I'm saying no. Why Max refused you. Don't want my help, Max said quietly. You want ownership. Leash. Color. Permission. He looked around the shattered chamber, and the moment I stop being useful, you'll decide I'm too dangerous. The skeleton stepped closer to him. Max rested a hand against its cracked shoulder. I'll hunt the nightmare creatures, he continued, because they need to be hunted. But I won't do it for you. Terms of freedom. The Inquisitor studied him for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he laughed. A short, tired sound. Figures, he said. The first Bonemancer. Choose a solitude. He drew a dagger and cut the chain binding Max's wrists. The shackles fell away. Gasps echoed through the chamber. You walk out, the Inquisitor said. Alone. No escort. No banner. He leaned closer. But understand this. Others won't be as patient as I am. Max met his gaze. I hope so. The solo adventurer Max left the sanctum at dusk. No ceremony. No cheers. Just a boy, a bone staff scavenged from the ruins, and a skeleton walking at his side. Outside the city walls, the land stretched, broken and screaming. Far in the distance, something massive roared, nightmare born, hungry, eternal. Max felt fear. Then resolve. Status updated role. Solo adventurer reputation. Unregistered threat classification. Undetermined. The skeleton stopped. It turned its skull toward the darkness, then stepped in front of Max again. Waiting. Protecting. Max swallowed. "Thanks," he whispered. The skeleton didn't respond, but it didn't move either. And that was enough. Endos Chapter 3, somewhere behind him, the Sanctum recorded his departure as a temporary containment failure. Somewhere ahead, nightmare creatures stirred, and walking between those two truths was the world's first Bonemancer alone, unclaimed, and already changing what loyalty meant. Chapter 4. The thing that learned to fear Bone the land beyond the Sanctum walls was wrong. Not ruined aware. Max felt it with every step. A low pressure beneath his feet like the ground was holding its breath. Dead trees leaned inward, their bark split into shapes that looked too much like faces. The sky above hung low and colorless, as if exhausted by watching too many things die. This was nightmare territory. Max tightened his grip on the bone staff strapped across his back and exhaled slowly. "All right," he muttered. "First job." The skeleton stopped beside him. It scanned the fog ahead, skull turning in sharp, deliberate increments. No command had been given, no signal send. It was listening. Threat proximity alert, nightmare entity detected. Classification: unknown. Hostile. The fog moved, not drifting. Something massive shifted within it, accompanied by the sound of wet muscle dragging across stone. Max's stomach dropped. So much for starting small. The nightmare beast had emerged like a bad memory forcing its way back into the mind. 6 limbs. Too many joints. A body like a skinned hound stretched over a frame that bent the wrong way. Its head was a vertical split of bone and flesh, lined with teeth that ground against each other constantly, as if chewing on thoughts. Eyes opened along its torso, all of them locked onto Max. Nightmare confirmed designation. Weeping Maw. Threat level. High behavior. Territorial predator. The weeping Maw screaming, not from its mouth but from the eyes embedded in its body. The sound slammed into Max's head, flooding him with panic that wasn't his own. He staggered. Blood ran from his nose. Mental pressure detected resistance. "Low move," Max shouted. The skeleton was already moving. First contact, the weeping Maw lunged. Too fast. The skeleton intercepted it, bones cracking as it slammed shoulder first into the beast's leg. Claws raked across the skeleton's back, tearing ribs free and scattering fragments across the ground. Max flinched as pain echoed through him, not crippling, but short. "Shed don't," he started. The skeleton shoved the beast back anyway. Not strong enough. Not yet. Bone Servant damaged integrity. 41%. Max raised his staff with shaken hands. "I can fix this." He focused. Pulled. Bones littering the ground trembled, but the weeping Maw was already recovering. It reared up, maw splitting wider than anatomy allowed, and slammed down straight at Max. The moment that should have killed him, Max froze. Too slow, too scared. The skeleton saw it, and chose. It leapt not to attack, but to shield. The weeping Maw's jaws closed around the skeleton's torso and crushed. Bones shattered. Connection screamed. Max dropped to his knees, choking on the feedback. No! Bone 7 destroyed the world, went quiet. For half a heartbeat, Max felt hollow. Then something pulled. Not from him. From the remains. Evolution. Under fire. The shattered bones did not scatter. They rearranged. Fragments slammed together midair, fusing with a sound like grinding stone. Thicker bones formed where thin ones had been. Plates overlapped. Spines reinforced. The skeleton reassembled itself inside the weeping Maw's jaws and pushed outward. Evolution triggered. Deathbound adaptation form updated. Guardian skeleton new traits acquired. Reinforced bone plating. Pain. Suppression. Threat prioritization. The weeping. Maw shrieked as its jaws were forced open from within. The skeleton emerged larger, broader. Bones darkened and etched with stress fractures that glowed faintly ivory. It planted its feet and tore. Turning the hunt. Max stared in disbelief. The skeleton moved differently now. Purposeful. Aggressive. It grabbed one of the beast's limbs and snapped it backward with brutal efficiency. Bone met nightmare flesh end. This time, the flesh gave way. The weeping maw recoiled. Its many eyes fluttered. Fear bled through the psychic pressure. Nightmare status. Panicking, you're afraid, Max whispered. He forced himself upright, heart hammering. Good. He slammed his staff into the ground and pulled with everything he had left. Bones erupted from the soil-old, ancient, forgotten end, wrapped around the nightmare's legs, anchoring it in place. The skeleton didn't wait. It climbed, and over ignoring claws and teeth, until it reached the central split of the creature's head. Then it drove its fist inside. The weeping maw convulsed once, and went still. Aftermath silence returned to the fog. The skeleton dropped from the corpse and turned toward Max. It was taller now. Heavier. Its skull bore a faint crack down the center like a scar. Max laughed weakly and then nearly collapsed. You saved me. The skeleton tilted its head. Bone servant status update. Designation. Guardian Unit Alpha. Bond strength increased. The weeping maw dissolved into ash, leaving behind something solid at its core, a blackened shard pulsing faintly. Nightmare core acquired potential use. Bone reinforcement evolution catalyst. Max picked it up with trembling fingers. The land around them felt quieter. Not healed, but wary. He looked at the skeleton standing watch beside him. Guess that makes us hunters now, he sighed softly. The skeleton turned back toward the fog, waiting for the next threat. End of chapter 4. Far away, unseen by Max, other nightmare creatures shifted uneasily. Something that should have died had learned how to grow, and worse, it had learned how to protect. Chapter 5. Teeth that smile back. Far away from Max Farah, enough that the land no longer whispered his name, something ancient stirred. Nightmare creatures did not fear in the way living things did. They reacted to pressure, to disruption, to changes in the rules that governed their existence. And the rules had shifted. Across the broken plains and corrupted forests, lesser nightmares paused mid-hunt. Burrowing things recoiled back into the soil. Winged shapes altered their paths. A few, older and crueler, turned their many eyes toward the same direction. Toward Bone, toward something that refused to stay broken. The land did not scream. It watched. The other hunter's Max wasn't alone. He learned that the hard way. The corpse of the weeping maw had fully cooled when the smell of iron and ozone reached him. Wrong sense. Clean and sharp, layered with alchemical residue. Footsteps followed. Measured. Confident. Max stiffened, hand tightening around his staff. The guardian skeleton shifted slightly, placing itself half a step in front of him without being asked. From the fog emerged 5 figures. Adventurers. Real ones. Not sanctum guards. Not conscripts. Hunters. The Grinning Blade Company, the one in front, was a woman with short silver hair and a sword slung casually over her shoulder. Her armor was mismatched, but well-maintained, etched with kill marks and monster sigils. Her smile was too easy. Well, damn, she said. Looks like we're late. Behind her, a hulking man wrapped in layered hide armor, carrying a cleaver that still dripped black ichor. A robed caster whose eyes glowed faintly green, fingers already tracing spell threads. A lean archer with a bone-tipped arrow drawn halfway back, and a quiet man with no visible weapon, which was always the worst kind. Their eyes flicked from Max to the skeleton to the nightmare corpse. Interests sharpened. Multiple hostiles detected classification. Awakened adventurers threat level. Variable. That's our mark, the silver-haired woman said, pointing at the dissolving remains of the weeping maw. We had a contract. Max swallowed. You're welcome. She laughed. Cute. Her gaze slid back to the skeleton. That yours? The guardian skeleton did not move. Its skull turned slightly, evaluating. When hunters size each other up, the caster frowned. That's not a necromancer summon. The quiet man nodded once. No decay. No binding scars. The silver-haired woman's smile widened. Oh, she said softly. That's interesting. Max felt the pressure shift, not overt hostility, but something worse. Appraisal. Predators didn't always kill immediately. Sometimes they tested. The first provocation, the hulking man stepped forward, cracking his neck. Rules are simple. We get the core. Kid, you walk away. Max glanced at the blackened shard in his hand. The guardian skeleton shifted again. Low. Braced. The archer's bow came up fully this time. Max raised his chin. No. The silver-haired woman sighed theatrically. Shame. She flicked 2 fingers. The archer loosed. A skeleton that doesn't flinch the arrow never reached Max. The guardian skeleton moved with brutal precision, stepping into the shot, catching the bone-tipped arrow mid-flight, and snapping it in half. It didn't roar. Didn't posture. It simply advanced. Guardian Unit Alpha threat response. Acted the ground crunched beneath reinforced bone as it took 1 step forward. Then, another. The grinning blade company tensed. The caster muttered, "The thing's reading us." The quiet man leaned back slightly. He'd already chose. The line is drawn. Max's heart pounded, but he didn't step back. I killed it, he said. I keep the core. The silver-haired woman studied him for a long moment. Then she laughed again, short and sharp. All right, she said. New deal. She pointed her sword at the skeleton. We don't fight that. Her eyes locked onto Max. We fight you. The land responded. Bones beneath the soil trembled. The guardian skeleton stepped forward once, more fully between Max and the adventurer's shield-raised stance. Perfect. Max felt the bond tighten. Not ownership, trust. End of Chapter 5, far away. Nightmare creatures shifted uneasily. Closer still, 5 seasoned hunters realized something too late. They went hunting a boy with a summon. They were standing between a Bonemancer and the thing that had decided he was worth protecting. Chapter 6. When the dead learned faster than the living, the guardian skeleton moved first. Not to attack. To position. It stepped half a pace left, angling its body so Max was no longer centered behind it but offset, harder to target. Harder to flank. 1 foot scraped the ground deliberately, grinding loose bone fragments into a shallow arc. Cover. Max felt it then, not a command. An intent brushing against his awareness. It was thinking. Behavioral shift detected. Guardian Unit Alpha trait developing. Tactical awareness. The grinning blade company noticed too. The quiet man's eyes narrowed. The thing's not just guarding. The silver-haired woman followed the skeleton's movement, smile fading. It's setting a line. Max swallowed. It does that now. That, she said dryly, is not comforting. The land breaks the standoff. The fog screamed. Not audibly, spatially. The ground convulsed as something massive tore its way upward 100 paces away, followed by another rupture, then another. Black ichor sprayed into the air, sizzling where it touched stone. The nightmare creatures had arrived. Not one. A pack. Multiple nightmare entities detected classification. Swarm-type predators, threat level. Catastrophic, they crawled out of the earth like parasites, shaking off sleep-long-limbed horrors, with segmented bodies and lamprey maws, their hides stitched with eyes that blinked independently. And behind them, something taller, broader, a nightmare that walked upright, dragging a spine club behind it like a king's scepter. The grinning blade company swore in unison. The archer hissed, "That's not our contract." The caster's voice went tight. "That's a territory response." The silver-haired woman looked at Max, then at the skeleton, then back at the approaching nightmares. "Well," she said, "looks like we're all late." A skeleton that anticipates before anyone gave an order. The guardian skeleton moved again. It struck the ground twice with its shield once, twice then pointed. Left flank, then it raised 2 fingers and curled them inward. "Fall back." Max's breath caught. You're planning." The skeleton didn't answer. It advanced 3 steps forward and stopped perfectly positioned at the choke point between broken stone pillars, a defensive anchor. The quiet man cursed softly. "It's using terrain." The silver-haired woman grinned again this time, sharp, impressed. "All right, Bone Kid Truce." Max didn't hesitate. Truce. Joining forces, the adventurers moved fast. The archer climbed Rubel without being told. The hulking man planted himself beside the skeleton, matching its stance instinctively. The caster began weaving layered spells control. Not damage. The guardian skeleton adjusted. It shifted half a step to give the cleaver room to swing. It raised its shield just before the first nightmare lunged, blocking a blow that would have taken Max's head off. Max felt the feedback, but it was muted. The skeleton had braced correctly. Tactical execution, successful damage transfer reduced. "Oh," Max whispered, "you're learning how to hurt less." The clash, the nightmares, hit like a tidal wave. The skeleton held. The hulking man roared and cleaved through chitin and muscle. The archer's arrows pinned creatures mid-leap. Spells detonated in controlled bursts, funneling enemies exactly where the guardian skeleton wanted them. It stepped, blocked, countered. It grabbed a nightmare by the jaw and used its body to shield Max from acid spit, bones sizzling but holding. Then it threw the creature right into another nightmare's path. The silver-haired woman laughed breathlessly. "Did your summon just use one monster as cover from another?" Max didn't look away. "Yes." The skeleton turned its skull briefly toward him, as if checking. Then it returned to the fight. The bigger one moves the upright nightmare, finally advanced. Each step cracked stone. The battlefield pressure doubled. The caster shouted, "We can't hold that." Max felt the pull in his chest, the urge to summon more. The skeleton raised one hand, palm open. "Wait." It planted its shield into the ground, bracing. Then it angled its body slightly, inviting the charge. A trap. Max's eyes widened. "You're baiting it." The skeleton didn't deny it. A decision made together, the giant nightmare roared and charged. Max slammed his staff down. Bones erupted not, randomly. But where the skeleton had left space, the creature stumbled. The skeleton surged forward, locking its shield against the nightmare's knee while the hulking man struck the exposed joint. The silver-haired woman leapt, blade flashing, carving deep. The monster collapsed with a sound like a collapsing building. Silence followed. Heavy, earned. After the screaming stops, the fog thinned. The remaining nightmares fled. No one chased them. The guardian skeleton straightened slowly, scanning the area until its posture finally relaxed. It returned to Max's side. Standing, guarding. The grinning blade company stared. The quiet man broke the silence first. "That wasn't a summon," he said. "That was a partner." The silver-haired woman nodded, "And it just saved all our lives." Max rested a trembling hand against the skeleton's arm. It didn't move away. Guardian unit, alpha trait advanced, tactical learning bond type, mutual dependence. Far away, nightmare creatures shifted again. This time, not uneasily, cautiously, because something new was walking the wilds. Not a hero, not a monster, but a Bonemancer whose dead did not wait to be told how to survive, and that terrified the world more than any spell ever could. Chapter 7. Half a core. Whole trust the battlefield smelled like scorched ichor and old dust. What remained of the giant nightmare lay crumpled where it fell, its massive frame already beginning to dissolve back into the land. Veins of dark light pulsed weakly beneath its hide cores, plural, fractured but potent. Max knelt beside the corpse, breath still unsteady. The guardian skeleton stood watch, unmoving, skull angled outward, alert even as the danger faded. No one rushed him. That alone felt strange. Dividing the dead, the silver-haired woman crouched across from Max, sword resting across her knees. "Contract says we take a core," she said lightly, but, given circumstances, she gestured at the shattered remains of the weeping maw nearby. Max nodded. "I already took half." He opened his hand. The nightmare, core now, splits-pulsed faintly, the two halves resonating in distant sympathy. The grinning blade company exchanged glances. The caster whistled softly. Clean split. The quiet man gave a single nod. Fair. The archer lowered her bow completely for the first time. The silver-haired woman smiled. Genuine now. "Then we'll call it square." An unexpected offer. Max turned toward the massive corpse of the giant nightmare. "There's more," he said. The company stiffened slightly. "That thing," Max continued, "wasn't part of your contract. And we will have survived without you." He gestured toward the fallen titan. "I don't need its core." The silence that followed was immediate and intense. "Giving it to us?" the hulking man asked, disbelief heavy in his voice. Max nodded. "As compensation. And, a peace offer." The guardian skeleton shifted subtly but didn't object. It had already assessed the threat. An acceptance. The silver-haired woman blinked, then laughed open, loud, unrestrained. "Bone Kid," she said, standing and sheathing her sword. "You're terrible at this business." She extended a hand. "But you good people." Max hesitated, then took it. Her grip was firm, warm, human. The caster clapped his hands together. "That core will fund us for months." The archer smiled faintly, and by a lot of apologies. The quiet man stepped closer to the skeleton, studied it for a moment, then inclined his head respectfully. "To you as well," he said. The skeleton didn't bow, but it didn't move away either. "Aname shared grinning blade company," the silver-haired woman said. "If you survive long enough, you'll hear it again." Max smiled weakly. "Max. Bonemancer." She smirked. "Yeah. We figured." She glanced at the skeleton. "Does it have a name?" Max opened his mouth, paused, then shook his head. "Not yet. Give it time," she said. "Names stick better when they're earned." The skeleton tilted its skull slightly, as if considering. Parting ways, they didn't linger. Adventurers never did. After harvesting the giant's core and sealing it in rune-lined containers, the Grinning Blade Company prepared to move out. Before leaving, the silver-haired woman looked back one last time. "Careful out here, Max. Word spreads fast." Max nodded. "So do nightmares." She grinned. "Not fast enough." They vanished into the fog, laughter and low voices fading into the broken land. What remained? The quiet returned. Max sat heavily on a stone, exhaustion finally catching up to him. The guardian skeleton stood beside him. "Still reliable. You could have taken it." Max said softly, "You know that, right?" The skeleton didn't respond, but it turned slightly just enough to block the wind. "Bond, confirm it. Guardian unit, alpha status. Companion." Not summon. Max looked at the half-core in his hand, then at the empty horizon. A solo adventurer, with allies he didn't expect, and a dead thing that had learned how to choose. "Estud." "All right," he said quietly. Let's go earn you a name. The skeleton stepped forward. Together, they walked into the screaming world, not alone, and no longer hunted by everyone they met. Not Jet. Chapter 8. While the dead stand watch, Max lost track of how many days passed. Out in the wilds, time didn't move forward, it wore down. Morning and night blurred together beneath the bruised sky, measured only by how often Max's hands shook and how heavy his eyelids felt. Nightmares came regardless, and Max hunted them. The rhythm of the hunt, some were small skittering things that burst from corrupted soil, all teeth and hunger. Others were slow and massive, dragging their bodies through the ruins like memories that refused to fade. Each fight followed the same pattern. The guardian skeleton moved first. Always. It scouted ahead, testing the ground with deliberate steps, pausing where the land felt wrong. When battle came, it placed itself between Max and danger without hesitation, shield raised stance, adjusted to terrain. Max learned to trust that positioning. He learned when to advance and when to stop. The skeleton learned faster. Tactical pattern recognized Guardian Unit Alpha efficiency. Increasing bones cracked. Nightmares fell. Cores were harvested. Some Max used grinding fragments into his staff, or feeding them to the skeleton's frame. Others he buried, letting the land absorb what it could without screaming. He was learning restraint. Rest came in pieces. Max would collapse against broken stone or the husk of a dead tree. Exhaustion finally winning. Sleep dragged him down hard and fast, dreamless. Heavy, like sinking into deep water. He never woke alone. The skeleton always stood nearby, sometimes directly over him. Sometimes just far enough to see the approaches. It never sat. Never slept. Its skull rotated slowly, methodically, tracking sound, movement, intent. When lesser nightmares wandered too close, they stopped, then turned away. Threat deterrence observed Guardian presence effect. Fear response, Max noticed. He pretended not to. The night it rained ash, on the 7th or maybe 9th night, ash fell from the sky like snow. Max slept curled near a collapsed tower, cloak pulled tight around his shoulders. His breathing was shallow, uneven. A ripple moved through the ash field. The skeleton turned. Two figures emerged from the darkness, long-limbed, hunched nightmares with heads like cracked masks. They crept forward slowly, drawn by warmth, by breath. The skeleton did not charge. It stepped sideways, blocking. One nightmare hissed. The skeleton raised its shield. The creatures froze. They stared at it, then slowly retreated back into the dark. No battle. No noise. The skeleton returned to its post. Max never woke. Change without orders by morning. Max noticed something different. The skeleton had added to itself, not new bones, rearranged ones. Its shoulder plating overlapped more cleanly. Its stance was tighter, more efficient. Max stared. You worked on yourself. The skeleton tilted its skull slightly. Adaptive self-modification condition. Passive evolution. Max laughed quietly, rubbing his eyes. Guess I should start paying you. The skeleton didn't react, but it shifted its weight, suddenly ready to move. A quiet understanding. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Max hunt. The skeleton guarded. When Max slept, the skeleton watched. When the skeleton took damage, Max felt it and learned how to help. It wasn't master and summon anymore. It was routine. Trust. Something solid in a world that broke everything else. End of Chapter 8. Far from any sanctum or road, rumors began to spread. Of a lone boy walking the wilds. Of nightmares found shattered into bone and ash. Of a skeleton that did not attack unless it had to. And of campsites where the ground was trampled by monsters. But the sleeping human in the center was never touched, because death, for once, had decided to stand guard. Chapter 9. The weight of choices Max had realized how heavy the bag had become until he tried to lift it with one hand. It tugged downward, space inside bending against its limits. The subspace bag stamped with the sigil of the Inquisition hummed faintly, strained but intact. A lot Max muttered. He sat on a slab of broken marble overlooking a shallow crater where nightmares had once poured through. The land was quiet now. Too quiet. The guardian skeleton stood a few steps behind him, spear planted in the ground, skull sweeping the horizon in slow arcs, on watch. Always. Taking stock, Max opened the bag. The ash shimmered as the contents spilled out, not physically, but visually, like a projection of what lay inside. Nightmare core. Small ones, dull and cracked. Medium ones with faint internal glow. A few larger cores dense, heavy with condensed malice, more than he'd ever seen in one place. More than a rookie solo adventurer should survive carrying. Inventory subspace bag. Nightmare core. 27 minor. 14 standard. 9 greater damaged. 4 capacity. 91% max. Exhaled slowly. Didn't think it'd add up this fast. The skeleton's skull turned slightly toward the display. Its fingers twitched. Not reaching. Just aware. 2 paths. Max picked up one of the standard cores. It pulsed weakly. Surface cracked, like old glass. He knew what would happen if he fed it to the skeleton. He'd seen it before. Bones thickening. Structure refining. Reflexes sharpening. Each core made the guardian less like a summon and more like something real. More dangerous. More independent. The thought made his chest tighten. Then there was the other option. Return to town. Sell the cores. Buy food that was in ration bars, bandages, charms, maybe a better cloak, maybe even a bigger subspace bag. Supplies meant survival, but towns meant eyes, questions, records. A silent opinion. Max looked back at the skeleton. What do you think? The skeleton didn't answer. It stepped closer, crouched, and placed one hand over a cracked minor core that had rolled near Max's foot. Not consuming it, just covering it. Claiming responsibility. Max swallowed. You'd get stronger. The skeleton nodded, barely perceptible. Then it moved its hand away and stepped back, leaving the core untouched. Guardian unit. Alpha preference. User safety prioritized. Max laughed quietly, rubbing his face. You're not making this easier. The cost of power. He stared at the cores again. Every one of them was a choice. Feed the skeleton, and it would protect him better, but the Sanctums already feared necromancy. An evolving, independent undead would push that fear into panic. Sell the cores, and he could stay human longer. Stay normal. But weakness killed faster than judging out here. Max closed the bag. For now, I'll decide tomorrow, he said. One more hunt's not gonna break us. The skeleton resumed its post without comment, but it adjusted its position slightly closer than before. Foreshadow far away, inside a walled city. A clerk stamped a report with shaking hands. Unregister it. Bone type. Awakened. Confirm nightmare core output. High recommendation. Monitor OR. Intercept. And deeper still. In lands Max hadn't yet reached. Something ancient shifted. A nightmare that did not hunt blindly. One that remembered what bones could become. End of chapter 9. Max lay back against the stone, staring at the cracked sky. Power or safety? Strength or secrecy? Tomorrow, he'd choose. And whatever he chose would change more than just him. Chapter 10. Bones that remember. Max didn't sleep on the decision. He sat cross-legged in the ruin. Subspace bag open. Cores laid out in a rough circle like a ritual. He had on to be intact, but somehow understood. The guardian skeleton stood at the center, waiting. The choice made all of them. Max said quietly. The words felt heavy. Final. The skeleton's skull lifted slightly, empty sockets fixed on him. No protest. No hesitation. Just acceptance. Max reached into the bag and began placing the cores of the skeleton's feet one after another. Minor. Standard. greater. Even the cracked ones, 27 fragments of condensed nightmare. Don't hold back, Max added. I won't. The skeleton raised one hand, then slammed it down. Consumption, the cores shattered, not explosively but pulled apart, as if gravity itself reversed. Dark energy surged into the skeleton's frame, threading through bone, filling gaps that weren't visible before. Runes burned faintly along its ribs, rearranging themselves mid-glow. Bone thickened. Joints refined. The shield fused more cleanly to the forearm, layers overlapping like plated armor. The spear lengthened, its tip reforming into a wicked, barbed point. Max felt it. Every evolution tugged at his chest, at the bond linking them. Pain, pressure, pride. Guardian Unit Alpha evolution in progress. Structure integrity, refined combat intelligence. Enhanced autonomy threshold. Approaching Max, clenched his teeth. Don't lose yourself. The skeleton straightened and placed its fist over its chest, a vow. Aftermath. When the glow faded, the ruin was quiet again. The skeleton was taller, broader. No longer just bone-thin veins of darkened marrow pulsed beneath its surface, like a living thing pretending not to be. It knelt. Not, commanded. Max exhaled slowly. Yeah, that's about right. Sustaining the living hunger followed. Always, Deeth. Max dragged the remains of a slain nightmare closer to the fire pit he'd carved into the stone earlier. He carved the meat carefully, avoiding corrupted organs, roasting what he could salvage. The smell was sharp but familiar. He ate, slowly, methodically, filtered water through cloth and ash like he'd done since childhood. Let the grit settle, drank without complaint. This was survival. This was normal. The skeleton stood nearby, silent guardian even as its body finished settling into its new form. Pushing forward by morning, the bag was light, empty of cores. Heavy with consequence, Max rolled his shoulders, feeling the familiar ache of movement after rest. All right, he said. One of you isn't enough anymore. The air around him chilled. The ground beneath his feet trembled faintly. A second summon, Max pressed his palm to the cracked earth. Rise, Bone answered. Fragments clawed their way free older, more brittle than the Guardian's frame. A simpler skeleton emerged, hunched and narrow, missing pieces it never had. It stood unsteadily. Max studied it. Support role, he murmured. Ranged, if possible. The skeleton tilted its skull, then its arms split, bone reshaping into a crude bow-like structure, string forming from hardened marrow. Skeleton unit. Beta summoned role. Support. Ranged stability. Low growth potential. HIGH. The Guardian skeleton stepped forward instantly, positioning itself between Max and the new summon. Assessing. The beta skeleton froze, then lowered itself, slightly submissive. The Guardian accepted it. A new Max smiled faintly. Guess that makes us a team. Two skeletons flanked him now. One refined, deliberate, choosing. One raw, adaptable, waiting to learn. Max adjusted his pack and began walking deeper into the ruined lands toward louder screams, heavier skies, and nightmares that would test what he'd just created. He didn't look back, because he'd already crossed the line. End of Chapter 10. Far beyond Max's senses, instruments within a distant sanctum spiked violently. Anomalous necromantic signature class confirmation. Bonemancer threat level, escalating in somewhere beneath the cracked sky. Something ancient smiled. Not because Max was strong, but because he was committing. Chapter 11. Closing the gap, the hunts changed after that. Not in danger, but in method. Max no longer fought alone with a single shadow at his back. Now there were two, Alpha and Beta, moving with different rhythms, different instincts, but toward the same goal. survival, growth. A new routine. Nightmares fell faster. Alpha took point, shield raised, spear precise, movements economical and merciless. It intercepted charges, pinned limbs, and forced enemies into kill zones without ever exposing Max. Beta stayed back. At first, awkward, its marrow bow creeped under tension, arrows forming unevenly, shots missing more than hitting. But it learned. Every miss adjusted the next angle. Every near it refined its aim. Max watched closely. Again, he'd say, after fights, nodding toward fallen nightmares. They collected the cores together, always together. Feeding Beta. Max made the rule early. All cores go to Beta. Alpha never objected. Beta consumed them greedily. Each core dissolved into its frame, knitting cracks, thickening limbs, stabilizing joints. Its bow arm grew smoother, more balanced. Arrows formed faster, sharper. Its posture straightened. Its skull lifted higher. Skeleton unit, Beta evolution. Accelerating structural stability. Improving threat assessment. Basic developing. Max watched the changes with mixed feelings. Pride and uncertainty. The question of equality, how strong is strong enough? Max muttered one night, poking at a small fire made from scavenged bonewood. Alpha stood watch. Beta practiced drawing and releasing arrows at imaginary targets, movements clumsy but persistent. Max rubbed his temples. Alpha was refined, built from experience, fed by a week of concentrated cores and countless battles. Beta was catching up. Fast. Too fast. Maybe. He didn't know what equal meant for things like them. Equal power. Equal autonomy. Equal will. The system didn't answer. It never did. It never did. When Beta saved him, the doubt vanished during the third hunt that day. A burrowing nightmare burst from beneath Max's feet, jaws snapping where he'd stood a heartbeat earlier. Alpha reacted instantly, but Beta fired first. An arrow of hardened marrow punched through the creature's eye socket, pinning it mid-lunge. Alpha had finished it cleanly. Max stared at Beta. Good shot. Beta didn't react, but its posture changed. Straighter. More confident. Combat contribution recorded unit. Beta. Threat. Neutralization confirmed growth. Without end. The hunts continued. Cores flowed. Beta grew. Its bow arm reshaped again, sleeker. More efficient. Quiver-like growths formed along its spine, storing spare arrows. Its skull developed faint ridges along the brow focus points. Alpha observed silently, not jealous. Evaluative. Sometimes Alpha adjusted Beta's positioning mid-fight with a hand signal. Beta followed. Learning. Max's unease. Max felt it in his chest. The bond stretched wider now, split between two entities. He could feel their states without looking. Alpha's calm certainty. Beta's restless hunger for refinement. I don't know when you'll match Alpha, Max said quietly as they rested beneath a fractured archway. Or what happens when you do? Neither skeleton answered, but both stood closer than before. Protective. End of chapter 11. As Max pushed deeper into nightmare territory, his presence began to change the land. Fewer wandering beasts, more coordinated attacks. Something was watching, measuring, and when the time came, it wouldn't descend fodder. It would send something meant to test whether one guardian was stronger, or whether two were already too much. Chapter 12. The third answer. Max had always known the truth. He just hadn't wanted to say it out loud. I'm the problem, he murmured. Alpha stood at the edge of the broken overpass, scanning the wasteland below. Beta knelt nearby, reshaping arrowheads with careful, repetitive precision. They were growing stronger every day. Max wasn't. His body still bled, still teared, still broke when struck the wrong way. No matter how powerful his summons became, one lucky hit would end him, and nightmares were very lucky. A dangerous thought. What if I don't stay behind? Max said. Alpha's skull turned slightly. Beta paused its work. Max swallowed. What if I fight with you? The thought had followed him for days, whispering in the back of his mind every time Alpha blocked a killing blow meant for him. Every time Beta fired desperately to cover his retreat. He clenched his fists. I don't want to hide anymore. Calling the third, the air grew cold. Max placed both hands on the ground, this time not in desperation, but intent. Answer me, he said quietly. Not as a weapon. Not as a soldier? Bone stirred beneath the cracked earth. Slowly, carefully, something rose. This skeleton was incomplete by design. No weapon, no shield. Its limbs were thin, plates segmented unnaturally, joints shaped wrong for walking. It stood silently before him. Max exhaled. You'll be Arma. The skeleton tilted its skull. You'll protect me. Wrap around me, move when I move. The world system hesitated. For the first time since his awakening, it paused. Warning, unorthodox summon configuration detected class. Bonemancer intent. Self-integration risk level. Max didn't look away. Do it. Becoming one, the skeleton stepped forward. Then it split. Plates separated into layered segments. Ribs unfolding like a macabre puzzle. The spine elongated, breaking into flexible vertebrae. Max didn't move. Didn't breathe. Cold bone touched his boots, then his legs, his arms. The skeleton wrapped around him not violently, but precisely. Plates locked together across his chest. A rib cage formed over his own, leaving space for breath. His arms slid into bone-lined bracers. A helm formed last skull-like, open-faced, hollow eyes staring outward. Pain flared. Not physical. Something deeper. Bond type. Direct overlay unit. Gamma-created function. Living armor synchronization. Unstable. Max gasped. The world sharpened. He could feel impacts that hadn't happened yet. Tension in Alpha's stance. The angle of Beta's bow. The weight of the wind against his left side. He staggered. Alpha caught him immediately, steadying, grounding. Because Max ripped the helm back slightly, sucking in air. That hurt! The armor responded. It adjusted. Pressure eased. Fit improved. Learning. INIT. Gamma user feedback integrated. Pain suppression. Partial mobility optimization. Active Beta stared. Its skull tilted sharply, analyzing Max from head to toe. Alpha stepped back. Slowly, evaluating the new configuration. Then Alpha did something unexpected. It struck Max's shoulder. Hard. The impact rang like stone on steel, but Max didn't fall, didn't break. He felt the blow, but it didn't end him. Max laughed short, breathless, almost hysterical. I'm still alive. Joining the fight, Max picked up his staff. It felt different now. Lighter. Connected. All right, he said, voice echoing faintly through the bone helm. No more hiding. Alpha moved to his left. Beta to his right. For the first time, Max stood with them not behind. 3 summons. 1 master. Or maybe something else entirely. End of chapter 12. Far away. A senior Sanctum researcher stared at a shattered scrying mirror. Living armor, she whispered. That's not necromancy. That's evolution. And beneath the screaming world, something ancient shifted uneasily, because a boy who commanded bones had decided to wear them. Chapter 13. When the hunter is seen, after that, the pattern changed again. Cores no longer went to Alpha, no longer to Beta. They all went to Gamma. They all went to Gamma. Max would unseal the subspace bag and press the glowing cores against his chest. Gamma would respond instantly. Bone. Plates parting. Runes flaring as the condensed nightmare essence was drawn inward. Each feeding made the armor tighter. Smarter. More him. The joints smoothed until movement felt natural. The weight balanced itself across his body. Impacts distributed. Pain filtered instead of simply absorbed. Max could run longer, strike harder, endure hits that would have shattered him weeks ago. Unit. Gamma. Evolution. Stabilize damage. Redistribution. Advanced. User combat. Compatibility. High Alpha and Beta did not fall behind. Without being fed, they adapted through combat alone. Alpha refining technique. Beta sharpening accuracy and battlefield awareness. Eventually, Max realized something. They had stopped feeling uneven. Equal rank had happened quietly. No flash. No announcement. Just a moment where Max stood between Alpha and Beta and felt balance. Their presence pressed evenly against his mind. No strain. No dominance. No lag. 3 bonds. Equal weight. Equal strength. Max smiled beneath the bone helm. We did it. Alpha lowered its spear slightly. Beta straightened its bow. Gamma tightened around Max's frame almost like a heartbeat. Formation status, Alpha. Frontline Beta. Support Gamma integrated defense synergy. Complete pushing forward, they moved deeper. Into lands, even the sanctums avoided. Ruins stacked upon ruins. Ground layered with bones from battles long forgotten. The air vibrated faintly. Not with screams, but with pressure. Max felt it through Gamma first. Resistance. Something heavy pressing back. Something's here, he said. Alpha halted instantly. Beta knocked an arrow. The land fell silent. They approached the air split. Not with a portal, but with presence. A shape stepped out from behind a collapsed cathedral, its body tall and distorted. Skin stretched tight over muscle that pulsed like it was breathing. Its head was crowned with branching horns, eyes burning with focused intelligence. Not hunger, recognition. It sniffed the air, then smiled. You are not prey, it said. The voice scraped like metal dragged across bone. You are a competition. Nightmare entity detected classification. Apex variant threat level. Extreme core density. Unknown. The shift. Alpha tightened its grip. Beta's bow hummed under tension. Gamma reinforced Max's spine, plates locking tighter. Max swallowed. Not fear. Excitation. This wasn't another monster to be cleared. This was a test. Formation, Max said. The skeletons moved instantly. The nightmare spread its claws and leaned forward. Come, it purred. Show me what the dead have taught you. End of chapter 13. Far above, the cracked sky pulsed brighter for just a heartbeat, and somewhere far away, sanctum alarms began to scream, not because of a gate opening, but because something powerful had finally noticed Max. Chapter 14. The price of standing the battle did not end quickly. It refused to. Hours of attrition. The apex nightmare did not fight like the others. It adapted. Every time Alpha found a rhythm, the creature broke it, changing reach, changing tempo, using the terrain as much as its claws. It learned Beta. Its firing arcs forced angles that made shots risky. Gamma took the brunt. Blows that would have pulped Max outright slammed into his armored frame. Plates fractured, runes flickered. Pain leaked through the suppression sharp. Max bled anyway, from his nose, from his mouth. But he stayed upright. Hold! Formation, he rasped. Alpha's spear shattered once reformed. Thinner, but sharper. Beta lost its bow armory, grew at mid-fight with jagged haste. The nightmare laughed as it bled. You break, it snarled. You all break. Near death at almost 1, a misstep. A split-second delay. The creature's claw punched through Gamma's chest plating, bone exploding outward. Max felt his heart stutter as pressure crushed his ribs. Darkness crept in. Alpha intercepted the follow-up strike with its own body, bones cracking catastrophically. Beta emptied every arrow it had in a desperate volleyball the nightmare long enough for Max to breathe again. Gamma sealed itself with brutal efficiency. Pain scrimmed. Critical condition unit. Gamma. Fractured. User vital signs. Failing. Max roared not, in rage, but refusal. Though the end the killing blow wasn't elegant, it was earned. Alpha locked the nightmare's limbs. Beta pierced its skull from behind. Max drove his staff reinforced by Gamma straight through its core. The apex, nightmare, convulsed, then collapsed. Silence followed. Not relief, just exhaustion so deep it felt like drowning. Aftermath. Max fell to his knees. Gamma loosened just enough to keep him breathing. Alpha collapsed beside him, half its frame shattered. Beta leaned against a pillar, movements slow and uneven. They were all broken, but alive. In the crater where the nightmare fell, something massive remained. A core, larger than anything Max had seen. Dense, quiet, waning. Max dragged himself forward and wrapped it in layered seals, forcing his shaking hands to obey. Later, he whispered, "This one was too much." Realization as they rested among ruins soaked in ichor and bone fragments. Max stared at the cracked sky. "If that's what's out here," he said hoarsely, "then 3 isn't enough." Alpha's skull tilted faintly. Beta twitched, acknowledging. Gamma tightened protectively. "This nearly killed us," Max continued. "Next time, it might." He clenched his fists. "I need more." Not greed. Preparation. Far beyond the battlefield, something ancient took note. Apex entities did not fall quietly, and the world dying as it was had just realized that a lone Bonemancer was becoming a force that required response. Max survived, but survival alone would not be enough anymore. Chapter 15. Uneven balance. Max didn't wait for his fear to settle. He knew better now. Hesitation was how people died. Expanding the circle, they camped where the apex nightmare fell inside a crater scorched smooth by hours of combat. Max sat at the center. Gamma loosened, just enough to let him move, pain pulsing in dull waves beneath the armor. Alpha stood damaged but vigilant. Beta repaired itself slowly. Gamma stabilized. "Promos wasn't enough," Max said quietly. "So we make it 5. The ground answered. Bone rose twice. The healer, the first skeleton, formed with deliberate restraint lighter frame, wider ribcage. Spine etched with shallow grooves meant to channel energy rather than force. Its hands were long, fingers splitting into fine bone filaments that hummed softly. Max studied it. "You keep us alive," he said. "That's your purpose." The skeleton inclined its skull. Skeleton unit. Delta Sumanat role. Combat healer. Support affinity. Bone vitality. Reconstitution the mage. The second summon was wrong. Its skull elongated slightly, eye socket steeper. Runes burned along its arms before Max finished speaking, reacting to intent rather than command. "Your offense," Max said carefully. "Magic. Area control." The skeleton's spine flared with pale light. Skeleton unit. Epsilon Sumanad role. Mage. Artillery affinity. Bone malice structural manipulation. 5. That should have been enough. But Max still had the giant core. The gamble, he stared at it for a long time. Dense. Silent. Heavy with power that had nearly ended them all. "If I give this to the wrong one," Max muttered, "it might tear the bond apart." Gamma tightened slightly, as if warning him. Alpha watched. Beta waited. Epsilon's runes pulsed hungrily. Max turned to Delta. "You'll be on the front lines with us," he said. "If you fail, we all die." Delta stepped forward. No fear, no hunger, just readiness. Max exhaled, pressed the giant core into Delta's chest. Ascension, the reaction was immediate, violent. The core did not dissolve. It detonated inward. Delta's frame shattered, then reassembled, bones reforging thicker, smoother, layered with flowing marrowlight. Its ribcage expanded, branching outward like wings made of vertebrae. Energy surged across the battlefield. Alpha staggered. Beta dropped to one knee. Gamma screamed inside Max's head, not in pain, but strain. Warning. Rank disparity. Detected core overload stabilizing. Delta rose, taller than Alpha, denser than Gamma. Its skull split slightly at the crown, revealing a radiant core node burning softly within. When it lifted a hand, Alpha's shattered spear reformed. Beta's cracked joints sealed. Gamma's fractures knit instantly, pain vanishing like it had never existed. Max gasped. Unit, Delta, evolved rank, higher tier function. Field restoration, rapid reconstitution, death denial. Authority level, exceeds current formation, uneasy silence, no one moved. Even the skeletons seemed aware. Delta turned its gaze toward Max. For a moment, the bond strained to much power, pressing back through the connection. 10 Delta knelt, not commanded. Chosen. The pressure eased. Max sagged slightly, Gamma catching him before he fell. "That," Max whispered, "wasn't supposed to happen." A new problem. Alpha stood rigid. Beta shifted uncertainly. Epsilons. Runes flared brighter, calculating, comparing. Delta was stronger. Far stronger. Too strong. If enemies like the Apex Nightmare existed in numbers, then this kind of evolution might be necessary. But imbalance bred instability, and instability killed parties faster than monsters. Max clenched his fists. "I didn't mean to make a leader," he said quietly. Delta remained kneeling, waiting. Far away, in places Max had never seen, ancient systems recalculated. A Bonemancer had created something that healed death itself, and the world already. Breaking did not know whether to fear him or hunt him before he could do it again. Chapter 16. A cry in the ash. Strength changed behavior. That truth came quietly then, all at once. Risk becomes routine with 5 on the field. Max stopped avoiding hordes. He targeted them. Alpha led the charge, shield and spear, carving open lanes. Gamma took the worst hits, letting Max stand in the heart of chaos rather than its edges. Beta's arrows fell in precise rhythms, thinning threats before they closed. Ani pesai loen. Epsilon learned. Bone spikes erupted from the ground in sweeping arcs. Walls formed, collapsed, reformed. Entire clusters of nightmares were crushed, impaled, or segmented into manageable kills. After every battle, Max gathered the cores and fed them to Epsilon without hesitation. Again, and again, and again. Skeleton unit. Epsilon evolution. Rapid area control. Advanced spell complexity. Increasing Epsilon's frame, thickened. Runes deepened, branching into layered sigils that pulsed with controlled malice rather than hunger. Its movement slowed not from weakness, but precision. Eventually, Max felt it. That familiar, equilibrium, balance, mostly one night, beneath a sky fractured like shattered glass. Max stopped mid-step. That's it. Alpha's presence felt steady. Beta's sharp. Gamma's protective. Epsilon's power pressed evenly against the bond. All of them equal. All of them except Delta. Delta still felt like an anchor dropped into the world itself. Heavy, absolute. Its healing range had expanded without Max noticing. Wounds closed before pain could register. It was comforting and terrifying. The pause Max chose to stop. They camped in the shell of a ruined watchtower, bones of old defenders still embedded in the walls. Max sat alone near a dying fire. Gamma relaxed enough to let him feel the night air. "I'm stronger," Max said quietly. No response. "I'm smarter. Safer." Still nothing. He stared at his hands. "But if I keep going like this, I don't know what I'll become." Delta stood nearby. Radiant core node dimmed to a watchful glow. For the first time in days, Max let his thoughts wander somewhere other than survival. The sound had cut through the night like a knife. "Help!" Max froze. The cry was human. Raw. Panicked. Another scream followed. Closer this time, pain layered over terror. Max was already on his feet. "Formation," he said sharply. Alpha snapped to the front. Beta took elevation. Epsilon's runes ignited. Delta's glow brightened. Gamma sealed tight around Max. The scream came again from beyond the ridge. The choice returns. Max hesitated for half a second. This wasn't a nightmare. This was someone like him. Someone weak. Someone who had done te me de diete. "I didn't come out here to be a monster," Max said. Then, Eran, unseen, eyes watched from the dark. Some hopeful, some calculating, and some already deciding whether the boy who commanded the dead would save them, or whether he was simply another horror, wearing a human voice. Chapter 17. Human first. Max didn't slow down, didn't scan for ambushes, didn't ask whether the cry was bait. Those were adventurer thoughts. This was simpler. Someone was dying. Too late for most, he crested the ridge and the smell hit him first. Blood. Burnt. Bone. Corrupted. Ichor. Below, the ground was torn. Apart craters. Broken weapons. Shattered shields bearing half-faded guild marks. Bodies lay where they fell, twisted in final moments of panic and resistance. An adventuring party. Gone. All but one. A young man lay slumped against a broken pillar, armor cracked open, one leg bent at the wrong angle. His breathing was wet and shallow. Eyes unfocused as he clawed weakly at the dirt. Around them moved the killers. 6 nightmare creatures. High level, the kind Max would have run from weeks ago. Horned brutes with layered hide. Blade-limbed stalkers that bent light around themselves. A hulking crawler whose core pulsed visibly through its ribbed chest. They turned as one. Hissing, snarling. Perspective changes. Max stopped, looked at them, and felt nothing. No fear. No urgency. Just calculation. "To think," he murmured. "You almost killed us once." Gamma tightened, instinctively, not in panic, but readiness. Alpha stepped forward. Beta was already aiming. Epsilon's runes flared. Delta's light expanded outward, washing over the wounded human like dawn breaking through fog. Threat assessment. Hostiles. Previously high risk. Current evaluation. Minor obstacles. The nightmares sensed it. Their confidence wavered. One took a step back. "Erasure, don't drag this out," Max said quietly. Alpha charged. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. Alpha crushed the first brute's skull with a single thrust. Beta's arrows punched clean holes through 2 stalkers before they could vanish. Epsilon raised a hand and the ground spiked upward, impaling the crawler and splitting its core open like rotten fruit. The remaining nightmares tried to flee. Delta moved. Light. Flared. Their wounds reversed on the wrong side. Bones unknit. Cores. They collapsed into lifeless heaps without ever reaching the tree line. Silence returned. Saving one, Max ran to the survivor. He dropped to his knees beside him, pulling Gamma back just enough to use his hands. "Hey," Max said urgently. "Stay with me." The man's eyes fluttered, barely focusing. "Thought I was next," he rasped. "You're not," Max said. "Delta." The healer stepped forward and placed both hands over the man's shattered chest. Light poured in. Bones shifted back into place. Blood reversed its flow. Torn flesh reattached itself with sickening gentleness. The man screamed once, then collapsed into unconsciousness. Alive, breathing evenly. Whole. Field restoration, complete status, stable aftermath. Max sat back hard, heart pounding now that it was over. He looked around at the dead nightmares. At the wiped-out party, at the lone survivor sleeping peacefully at his feet. "I didn't even think," Max whispered. Gamma hummed faintly, steadying him. Delta stood quietly. Light dimmed. Alpha, Beta, and Epsilon resumed perimeter watch without being told. Max realized something then. He hadn't rushed in because he was confident. He hadn't rushed in because he was strong. He rushed in because despite the bones, the armor, the dead at his command, he was still human. Somewhere, far from the battlefield, a rumor would begin of a boy who walked into certain death and turned it into silence, and of the ones he saved who would never forget what stood between them and the nightmares. The young man woke slowly. Max sat nearby, helmet off. Gamma loosened into a half-formed frame around his shoulders. Alpha, Beta, Epsilon, and Delta maintained a wide perimeter, their silhouettes unmistakable against the broken landscape. The boy flinched when he saw them. Then he saw Max. "You're real," he said hoarsely. Max blinked. "I hope so. Introductions. My name's Uwan," the boy said after a moment. "Scout class, or I was." Max nodded. "Max Bonemancer." Yuan swallowed. His eyes flicked to Alpha, then Beta, then the others lingering on Delta's faint glow. "They followed you," Yuan said. Not a question. Max hesitated. Then he decided there was no point hiding it. "Alpha, Beta, Gamma." He tapped the bone plating at his chest. "Delta's the healer. Epsilon's the mage." Yuan laughed weakly. "You named them like people." "They are," Max said simply. "An escort, not a rescue." Yuan struggled to stand. Gamma shifted automatically to support Max as he helped him up. "I can make it back," Yuan said quickly. "You don't have to. I'm not letting you walk alone," Max replied. Uden stared. "You barely know me." Max looked away. "My mission's to clear nightmares," he said. "There's a group of adventurers east of here. I'm heading that way anyway." It was a good excuse. Convincing, even to himself, the truth sat heavier in his chest. The sanctum one te one may bite. The walk back, they moved at a steady pace. Yuan talked about his party, about their mistake, about how confident they'd been. Max listened quietly. Whenever nightmares appeared, they died quickly, efficiently, almost silently. Yuan stopped reacting after the third fight. By the fifth, he just watched. By the seventh, he stared at Max like he was trying to memorize him. The handoff, they found the other adventurers at dusk, 3 parties and camped together, wary but alive. Weapons rose instantly when they saw Alpha and Epsilon. Then Delta stepped forward. Light washed over the camp. Wounds eased. Fatigue lifted. Fear softened. "Found a survivor," Max said, gently pushing Yuan forward. The groups rushed to him, voices overlapping, relief breaking through tension. The leader turned back to Max. "We owe, you know," Max interrupted. "You don't." He stepped back. Gamma sealed fully. Alpha and the others shifted into formation without being told. Max was already turning away. "Goodbye." Yuan broke free. "Wait." Max paused. Yuan bowed deep, clumsy, sincere. "I won't forget," he said. "I swear it." Max nodded once. Then he left. How legends begin, Ewan talked. 2 healers, 2 captains, 2 merchants. He told them about a boy his age walking the ruins with 5 skeletons, about armor made of bone, about nightmares erased like pests, about a healer that reversed death itself. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't need to. Stories spread, and when they reached the sanctum, they changed shape. Unconfirmed report. Bone Lord walking necropolis. The boy who commands death, Max, moved deeper into the broken world, unaware that his name was no longer his alone. He thought he was avoiding the sanctum, but legends have a way of finding walls, no matter how high they are built. Chapter 19. The missing Shadow Max didn't sleep right away. He lay against the broken stone of an old transit arch. Gamma loosened just enough to let him breathe comfortably, eyes tracing the fractured sky while his thoughts circled the same problem again and again. Something was missing. A party, not a swarm alpha. Frontline, beta ranged support. Epsilon, mage in battlefield. Control. Delta healer. Anchor. Impossible. Gamma defense. Survival. Integration. 5 was strong. 5 was overwhelming, but 5 still reacted. They didn't see first. Max frowned. We don't have eyes ahead, he murmured. No one to strike before the fight starts. Alpha's skull turned slightly. Beta paused, mid-adjustment. Epsilon's runes dimmed, then flared in acknowledgement. Max wears a fully bodied skeleton. Armor Alpha is a skeleton with a shield, and Spear Beta is a skeleton with a bone. Bow Delta is a skeleton healer. Epsilon is a skeleton mage. Gamma is a large skeleton with a large shield. Delta remained still. They all knew the safe place. Max chose his ground Carfulia, collapsed subterranean relay station buried under rubble, shielded from the open sky and saturated with old death. No portals. No lingering nightmare pressure. Safe enough. Gamma detached fully this time, resting against the wall like a waiting shell. Max pressed his palm to the stone. One more, he said. The 6th bone did not rise explosively. It slid out of the shadows. Thin. Compressed. Limbs folded inward. Joints reversed for low-profile movement. The skull was narrow. Eye sockets elongated and angled downward. No weapon formed. Not yet. Max watched carefully. You scout, he said quietly. You move ahead of us. You don't fight unless you have to. The skeleton leaned forward, spine flattening, almost to the ground. Assassin, Max added. When you do strike, it ends. The skeleton's fingers split into hooked talons, then retracted again. Skeleton unit. Seta. Summoned. Roll. Scout Assassin Affinity. Bone. Shadow Silence. Initial rank. Low growth potential. Extreme. Seta. Banisit. Not teleported. Not dismissed. It simply wasn't there anymore. Max's breath caught. Alpha shifted instantly. Scanning. Epsilon's runes flared defensively. Delta's light pulsed once. Then Zeta reappeared behind Max. Still. Waiting. The cost of balance. Max smiled despite himself. There you are. Zeta inclined its skull a fraction, but the feeling came immediately after. Strain. 6 bonds. Gamma tightened involuntarily as Max's head throbbed. He steadied himself against the wall. Worth it, he muttered. Bond network, updated active units. 6. Mental load. Elevated, new. Borden. Max looked at Zeta. You're behind, he said frankly. I'll get you there. That meant more hunting. More cores. More risk. But he'd already accepted that road. Alpha moved to the entrance. Beta climbed Overwatch. Epsilon reshaped the terrain. Delta watched Max. Gamma reattached. sealing him in familiar bone. Zeta melted into shadow ahead, a complete party. At last, in the distance, nightmares stirred. Not randomly. They were being drawn because a Bonemancer with a full formation had just decided to keep pushing forward, and the world was running out of places to hide. Chapter 20. The city that followed Max didn't notice it at first. He was too busy moving forward. Impossible progress, block by block, street by street. By street, what had once taken full adventuring companies weeks, sometimes months, Max cleared in days. Alpha broke lines. Beta erased threats at range. Epsilon reshaped battlefields before nightmares could adapt. Zeta removed sentries before fights even began. Delta erased casualties that should have ended the run. Gamma kept Max alive when everything else failed. The city screamed less with every passing night, and Max never slowed. Why he did it wasn't altruism. Not really. Every cleared zone meant more fights, more cores, more evolution. Zeta grew faster with every core, sharpened into something terrifyingly efficient. Its movements became predictive, its strikes precise to the point of cruelty. Max watched carefully. Balance mattered. He was doing this for them. For the team, that's what he told himself. What he didn't see, while Max pushed outward, life crept inward. The first were scavengers, bold enough to test the silence. Then traders, then families who had lost everything elsewhere. They set up camps, repaired doors, lit lanterns that didn't go out at night. When nightmares didn't come back, they stayed. The first shops, a woman opened a food stall in a cleared plaza. A blacksmith repaired blades, using scrap left behind by fallen creatures. A healer set up under a shattered awning, working without fear of interruption. They didn't see the battles, they saw the aftermath. Clean streets, burned cores, skeleton footprints that never lingered long, and rumors, a name he never claimed. They called him things. Bone Guardian. White Knight, Lord of the Quiet Streets. Children left offerings near corners where Alpha had once stood guard. Shopkeepers closed early, confident nothing would attack. No one asked who had done it. They totally knew. The disconnect. Max returned one evening to an area he'd cleared days earlier and stopped. Lanterns. Voices. The smell of cooked food. The street he remembered choked with nightmare corpses now held people laughing softly around a repaired fountain. Gamma tightened in reflex. Zeta melted deeper into shadow. Delta's light dimmed, not out of caution, but respect. Max stared. What? A man spotted him. Went pale, then bowed. Others followed. A woman whispered, "It's him." Max stepped back instinctively. He stopped. He shouldn't be here. The man shook his head. You made it say. Max opened his mouth, closed it. He hadn't done it for them. But the city didn't care about intent. Hero without consent, Max left that night. Pushed further, cleared faster. But everywhere he passed, the same thing happened. Silence. First, then, people. The world filling in behind him whether he wanted it to or not. Max hunted for power. But behind him, hope took root. And in a dying world, hope was more dangerous than nightmares. Because once people believed in him, they would expect him to stay. Chapter 21. The five walls of a dying city. The city was not a city. It was a wound layered, sealed, and constantly reopening. From above, it looked like 5 massive rings carved into the earth, each surrounded by walls so tall they split the cracked sky. Those walls were not built to protect people equally. They were built to decide who deserved to live longer. Max learned this not from books or lectures, but from blood and bone. The first sanctum, the inner ring at the very heart of the city, stood the inner sanctum. White stone towers untouched by corrosion. Streets washed clean by magic. Barriers hummed softly day and night, powered by relics older than recorded history. This was where the wealthy, the commanders, and the true rulers lived. Inquisitors, strategists, high-ranking awakened whose names never appeared on casualty lists. Nightmare creatures had never set foot here, and if they ever did, the authorities would call it the end of the world, not because of the loss of life, but because the walls had failed. The second sanctum, the ring of utility outside the inner ring, lay the second sanctum. This was where sanctioned adventurers lived. Guild halls, training grounds, healers, blacksmiths, and researchers filled its streets. People here fought nightmares, but only with preparation, support, and escape routes. Those who proved useful to the sanctum were rewarded with safety. Those who didn't were quietly reassigned outward. The third sanctum, the Forgotten Ring, the third sanctum was where desperation settled. The poor, refugees from fallen cities, failed, awakened. Families who had nowhere else to go. The walls here were thinner. Supplies were rationed. Patrols were slower to arrive. Nightmares broke through this ring more often than the others, and when they did, the inner sanctum reports used the same phrase every time. Acceptable losses. The fourth sanctum, the killing grounds. This was where Max had been released. A broken sprawl of ruined buildings, collapsed streets, and old battlefields soaked so deeply in death that the ground itself whispered at night. There were no real homes here, no markets, no promises. Adventurers were allowed to enter, but only the desperate stayed. The fourth sanctum existed for one reason alone: to be devoured instead of the ring. Max didn't clear it for the city. He cleared it for his skeletons. For Alpha's shield. For Bataz blade. For Gamma's armor wrapped around his body. For Delta's impossible healing. For Epsilon's magic. For the silent scout that stalked ahead of them all. He killed, fed cores, evolved his dead end. The city slowly followed behind him, pretending it had planned this all along. Shops reopened. People returned. Walls were repaired. They called him a hero. Max didn't correct them. The fifth sanctum, the Black Ring. Beyond the outermost wall lay the fifth sanctum. No civilians, no settlements, no recovery efforts. This was where super high-level nightmare creatures gathered, drawn together by something ancient and malignant. The air itself felt hostile. Sound didn't travel correctly. Even light seemed hesitant. Veteran inquisitors refused to enter unless directly ordered. This ring wasn't meant to be reclaimed. It was meant to contain, because if the creatures beyond that wall ever began moving inward, the sanctums wouldn't fail all at once. They would collapse one ring at a time, starting with Max's territory. Max stood at the edge of the fourth sanctum, staring at the distant wall that marked the fifth. His skeletons waited silently around him. The city believed the walls defined safety. Max was beginning to understand the truth. Walls didn't protect the world. They only decided who had to fight so others didn't have to, and he was getting dangerously close to a boundary no one had ever meant for a Bonemancer. Too rich. Max was looking forward to traveling beyond the fourth sanctum, but there was something else that was trying to grab his attention. Chapter 22. The quiet before the Black Ring. The fourth sanctum had finally run out of screams. Not the sudden silence of a trap, but the hollow stillness of a battlefield that had been emptied. Corpse by corpse, core by core. The air itself felt lighter, as though the land was unsure how to exist without something trying to kill it. Max stood atop a fractured watchtower, staring at the wall of the fifth sanctum. It loomed like a horizon made of stone and corruption-blackened blocks, veined with pulsing mana. Old containment sigils burned so deeply into the surface they could never be erased. Whatever lay beyond wasn't meant to be fought casually. Behind him, 6 figures waited. No 6 soldiers. Alpha stood broad and immovable, layered bone plating overlapping like a fortress wall. Beta's skeletal frame was sleek and sharpened, every joint optimized for lethal efficiency. Gamma coiled around Max's body in standby form, its bone segments flexing like living armor waiting to be worn. Delta's core pulsed steadily, radiating restorative power so dense it distorted the air around it. Epsilon's skull burned with cold arcane light, sigils orbiting in controlled patterns. Zeta barely existed at all its form, phasing in and out, a scout born of shadow and intent. They were balanced. They were evolved. They were ready. Max let out a slow breath. "I don't know what's on the other side," he said quietly. "So we don't rush." Zeta's skull tilted, acknowledging the order without words. "You scout." The world system answered. Zeta unraveled into shadow and silence, bones thinning until they slipped between moments themselves. In an instant it vaulted the wall and vanished into the fifth sanctum. A faint tether remained. Alive? Watching. Max allowed himself a nod. One by one, he unsummoned the rest. Alpha dissolved first, then Beta. Gamma peeled away from his body, leaving him suddenly aware of how fragile flesh truly was. Delta lingered, its presence reluctant to fade. Epsilon vanished last, arcane light snapping shut like an eye closing. For the first time in weeks, Max stood alone, a 15-year-old boy with dirt under his nails and too much blood on his hands. He pulled his cloak tighter, adjusted the plain mask covering his face, and turned away from the wall. If he was going to cross into the fifth sanctum, he would do it prepared. The market in the fourth sanctum had grown like a scar healing badly. Stalls crowded reclaimed streets. People bartered beneath cracked buildings that still whispered at night. Traders sold weapons, food, charms, and scavenged relics with practiced urgency. Max moved through them, unnoticed. No skeletons. No legend, no fear. Just another adventurer at a reinforced stall etched with anti-corruption sigils. A core dealer accepted his subspace bag. The man opened it. Then, Frosi. His augmented eyes flickered wildly as he scanned the contents. "These," the dealer muttered. "Fourth sanctum core, Hygre." Max stayed silent. The man lifted a larger core, hands shaking. "And this one, this shouldn't even exist out here." "How much?" "Max, ask it." The dealer swallowed. "Enough for a larger bag, enough supplies to disappear for months." "Deal." Credits changed hands. A reinforced subspace bag slid across the counter triple. The capacity, sealed against corruption. No questions, no names. Max turned away before curiosity became a liability. As he left the market, the city felt different, not safer. Quieter. Far beyond the wall, Zeta crouched among warped ruins, watching shapes move through the darkness nightmares, larger, denser, more deliberate than anything the fourth sanctum had birthed. Some of them paused. Some of them turned, as if they had sensed something approach their domain. Max didn't know it yet, but the fifth sanctum had felt his presence, and it was already deciding whether he would die there or become something far worse. Chapter 23. Unnoticed hero Max kept his distance as he followed the group of adventurers. They laughed too loudly, armor clanking as if they wanted the city to hear that they were still alive. They moved with confidence, but not the kind born from experience, the kind borrowed from numbers and walls that felt permanent. They entered a guild hall. Max, slow with, the building hadn't existed weeks ago. He was sure of it. The stone was new, the sigils still sharp, the banner above the entrance barely weathered. Someone had moved fast to claim the territory he'd cleared. Strangely, that didn't anger him. It made him feel steadier. He slipped inside after them. The air was warmer here, safer, lit by monolamps. Instead of burning barrels and scavenged crystals, conversations overlapped quest, negotiations, complaints about pay, rumors about monsters further out normal things. Max pulled his cloak closer and scanned the hall. No Inquisitor markings. No Sanctum Authority enforcers. Just guild staff and adventurers trying to pretend the world wasn't ending. His gaze drifted to the request board. It was packed. Escort missions. Cleanup contracts. Missing persons. Monster suppression requests, stacked so thick they overlapped one another. Max didn't stop to read a single one. He had already done more than any of them realized. Instead, he went to the front desk. The clerk looked up young, tired, eyes dulled by long shifts. Cores. Ores contracts. Core. Max said quietly. He placed his subspace bag on the counter. The clerk opened it, paused, then carefully closed it again, eyes flicking up to Max with sudden caution. "Oh, get the exchanger," the clerk said. No alarm. No shouting. Good. The exchange was quick, efficient, professional. Coins and sealed credits replaced the remaining cores less than before, but still more than enough. No questions asked, no attempt to trace him. When it was done, Max nodded and stepped away. The smell of food reached him before he realized he was hungry. The guild cafeteria was modest, but clean. Stew thick with meat and root vegetables. Bread that was still warm. Water purified enough that it didn't taste like rust or ash. Max sat alone at a corner table and ate slowly. Every bite grounded him. For a few minutes, he wasn't a Bonemancer, wasn't a clearing force, wasn't a problem waiting to be discovered. He was just a boy eating a decent meal in a place that shouldn't exist yet but did. When the bowl was empty, Max stood, pulled his cloak back on, and left without looking back. The watchtower greeted him with silence. High above, Zeta waited, where shadow met broken stone. Max climbed the stairs 2 at a time, heart steady now. As he reached the top, the faint tether snapped into clarity setas, awareness flowing back into him in fragments. Movement, massive shapes, territory markings, predators that watched instead of charged. Max leaned against the stone and closed his eyes. The 5th sanctum wasn't chaos. It was organized, and that made it far more dangerous. He tightened his grip on the wall and looked toward the blackened horizon beyond it. "Oh, right," he murmured. "I'm ready." Below him, the 4th sanctum, live shops opening, people settling, guild banners rising. Above him, something ancient shifted. And between the two, Max stood alone, with only the dead willing to follow him into what waited next. Chapter 24. Beneath the 4th sanctum, the tower overlooking the 5th sanctum was not meant to be climbed anymore. Its stairs had collapsed in 3 places, and the upper floors leaned, just enough to make the structure groan whenever the wind pushed through the broken arches. Max crouched near a shattered window, cloak pulled tight, watching the holy complex below. The 5th sanctum glowed even at night. Runes of warding traced its outer walls in gold and white, holy energy flowing like veins beneath polished stone. Clerics moved in measured patrols, their prayers murmuring softly as censers swung at their sides. Max frowned. Too many eyes. Too much faith. This place was dangerous not because it could kill him, but because it could see him. He was about to withdraw deeper into the tower when a voice echoed from the stairwell behind him. "I swear, it's up here." I saw the light. Max froze. Hands tightened instinctively. Necromantic energy prickling under his skin. One thought and bone would answer. One thought and this tower would become a grave. Instead, he waited. Footsteps approached light. Uneven. Nervous. 4 figures emerged from the shadows. The young adventurers, they were barely more than kids. The first was a tall boy in mismatched leather armor, sword at his hip that had clearly never seen real blood. He held it anyway, knuckles white. Behind him was a girl with cropped dark hair and a staff that crackled faintly with beginner-level spellwork. Her eyes were sharp, though calculating. A stocky dwarf followed, beard braided but too clean, shield strapped to his arm like he was still getting used to the weight. Last came a halfling, hood up, crossbow slung across his back, gaze flicking everywhere at once. They all stopped when they saw Max. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. The sword boy said finally. "You live here?" Max almost laughed. He stood slowly, hands visible. "No," he said. "Just passing through." The mage squinted. "That's a lie." Max tilted his head. "It usually is." The dwarf shifted, then lowered his shield a fraction. "You're not one of the sanctum's lot. No holy glow. No chanting." "Good eyes," Max said. The halfling stepped forward, curious rather than afraid. You were watching the sanctum, weren't you? Same? Us? Os. That earned him a look from the others. We weren't watching, the sword boy protested. We were. Scouting, Max raised an eyebrow. Scouting holy ground with 4 novices. Interesting. Interesting. An unexpected offer. The mage tapped her staff against the stone. We've got a problem. A big one. The dwarf snorted. A nightmare problem. That word made Max's stomach tighten. Define nightmare, he said carefully. The halfling grimaced. Something in the sewers, under the 4th sanctum. People go in, don't come back. Survivors wake up screaming, eyes bleeding, minds wrong. The mage nodded. Illusion magic, fear projection, dream invasion. It feeds while you sleep. Max looked past them, down toward the sanctament below it. The sewers, old stone, older bones, a perfect nest. And the sanctum? Max asked. They won't go down there, the sword boy said bitterly. Too many wards interfering with their blessings. They seal the tunnels and pray. The dwarf spat. Meanwhile, people disappear. Silence settled. Then the halfling looked directly at Max. You move quiet. You watch from shadows. You didn't run when you saw us. He smiled slightly. You'd make a good scout. Max felt the irony, twist like a knife. If they knew what I really was. He glanced at their gear, their stances, their fear. They were brave, stupidly so. And if they went down there alone, they'd die. What makes you think I'd help? Max asked. The mage met his gaze. Because you're hiding here instead of running, and because you look like someone who's seen worse than a sewer monster. Max closed his eyes for a moment. The echo stirred. Something beneath the city recognized him. He opened his eyes. I won't lead, he said. I won't take commands. I'll walk ahead. I warn you. And when I say run, you run. No arguments. The sword boy grinned, relief breaking through his nerves. Dill, the dwarf clapped Max on the shoulder before thinking better of it. Name's Bran. Lysa, said the mage. Tick, the halfling added. They looked at Max expectantly. He hesitated, then said, Max, not Ali, just incomplete. Descent into the sewers. They entered through a forgotten drainage, grate near the sanctum's outer wall. The stench hit immediately. Rot, stagnant water, and something else beneath it. Something old. Max moved ahead of them, steps silent, senses extended. He didn't summon, didn't call bones. He listened. The echo whispered, not of death, of fear. The tunnels curved downward, stone damp and slick. Faint scratches lined the walls long, uneven, as if something had dragged claws while crawling away from something worse. Tick swallowed. I don't like this. Good, Max said quietly. That means you're still thinking. Then the air changed. Cold, heavy. The sound slithered through the dark night, a roar, not a voice, but a lullaby, half remembered and wrong. Lysa's breath hitched. It's close. Max raised a hand. Lights out, he whispered. They obeyed instantly. In the darkness, Max smiled grimly. A nightmare that feeds on fear. Let's see how it handles the dead. Far ahead, something noticed them, and it was already dreaming of Max. Chapter 25. Beneath the city's skin, before they even reached the sewer entrance, Max brushed his fingers against the shadow at his side. Go, he whispered. Zeta separated from the darkness without sound, dissolving into a thin smear of intent that slid ahead of the group. The tether stretched faint, steady feeding Max impressions as the scout moved faster than any living thing could. Below the city, something was breathing. They stopped before a collapsed stone arch, half buried in filth and rubble. Foul water trickled out in slow, black rivulets, carrying the stench of rot and corruption. This is it, the fighter said, wrinkling his nose. Entrance, to the old sewage grid. Max studied the shadows inside. They felt thick. "Stay here," he said calmly. "I'll scout ahead. If I don't come back in 10 minutes, leave." The archer frowned. "You sure you don't want backup?" Max shook his head. Tight tunnels. Too many boots make noise. That logic satisfied them. He slipped inside alone. The sewage system swallowed sound. Stone tunnels curved downward, slick with grime and half-fossilized waste. Old runes carved into the walls flickered weakly long past their prime. Water lapped at Max's boots as he moved deeper, every step careful, controlled. Minutes passed. Then the tether snapped sharper. Zeta returned, not physically, but in fragments of sensation. Mass, low ceiling, anchored territory. One core signature. Predator behavior. Max stopped walking. "What is it?" he whispered. Zeta's impressions sharpened. A nightmare beast shaped like a bloated centipede fused with human torsos, dozens of half-formed faces screaming silently from its segmented body. Corrupted limbs scraped the tunnel walls, mucus dripping from its mandibles. Strong but not fifth sanctum strong. Fourth sanctum survivor, it had learned to hide. Max exhaled slowly. "Can you cripple it?" he asked. Zeta's response carried certainty. "Yes, asterisk, but don't kill it," Max said. "Injure it. Slow it. Make it desperate." A pause. Then understanding. Zeta vanished again. The sewer trembled. A distant screech echoed through the tunnel's wet. Furious, pained. Stone cracked. Water surged violently. Max waited. Another scream, this one broken, uneven. Good. He turned and walked back the way he came, unhurried, boots splashing softly. When he emerged into lantern light, the adventurer stiffened. "You find anything?" the caster asked. Max nodded. "One target. Big. Injured. It won't run far." Their expressions sharpened, instantly fear edged with excitement. "You heard it already?" the fighter asked. "Just enough," Max replied. "You'll get the kill." That was all they needed to hear. They drew weapons, adrenaline rising, none of them noticing the way Max's shadow didn't quite behave like the others. As they moved into the sewage together, Max stayed near the rear, silent, watchful. This fight wasn't for him. He had already cleared this city once. Tonight, he would let someone else wear the victory. And beneath the stone and filth, the wounded nightmare thrashed, unaware that its survival had been decided not by mercy, but by convenience. Chapter 26. What remains worth? Saving the nightmare died screaming. Steel and spell tore through corrupted flesh as the wounded beast thrashed in the sewage tunnel, its many mouths shrieking in overlapping agony. The adventurers fought hard and messy, imperfect, terrified but together. They adapted quickly to the creature's weakened movements, capitalizing on every stagger Zeta had carefully engineered. Max stayed back. He watched. When the final blow landed and the core spilled free in a wash of dark light, the tunnel fell silent except for heavy breathing and the drip of foul water. They had done it. Cheers broke out short, disbelieving laughs filled with relief rather than triumph. "We actually pulled it off," the archer muttered. The fighter wiped gore from his blade and turned to Max. "Good scouting. That thing would have wiped us if we walked in blind." The caster nodded, already cradling the core. "Guild's going to pay well for this." The support hesitated, then reached into their pouch and held out a small stack of coins. "Your share." Max looked at the offered reward. Coins. Credit. Recognition. All things he no longer needed. He shook his head. "Keep it," Max said. "I'm on another mission." They stared at him. "You serious?" the fighter asked. "You earned it." Max gave a faint smile. "Someone else needs it more." Silence lingered for a moment. Then respect replaced confusion. "Well," the archer said, extending a hand. "Thanks for watching our backs, Max." Max took it briefly. "Stay alive." They laughed, waved, and headed back toward the surface already, talking about drinks, repairs, and what job to take next. Normal plans. Human plans. Max watched them disappear into the lantern-lit tunnels until their voices faded completely. Then he turned away, and the watchtower greeted him once more. Zeta emerged from the shadows as Max reached the top, reforming silently beside him. The fifth sanctum's wall loomed beyond, dark and patient. Max leaned against the stone and looked back toward the city. Lights flickered where there had once been only ruins. People moved through streets that had been killing grounds not long ago. Guild banners fluttered in reclaimed wind. He thought of the adventurers in the sewer. Clumsy. Brave. Afraid but willing to step forward anyway. Those, Max realized, are the people worth protecting. Not the inner sanctum elites behind layers of walls and relics, but the ones who still chose to fight despite knowing they might die forgotten. "They're the hope," Max murmured. "The future." Zeta's skull tilted slightly, as if listening. Max turned back toward the fifth sanctum. If monsters came again, if the walls failed, if the world finally broke, it wouldn't be the powerful who held it together. It would be people like them. And until that day came, Max would stand between the darkness and what little light remained, even if no one ever knew his name. Chapter 27. Eyes in the dark, Max didn't hesitate any longer. He rested his hand against the cracked stone of the outer wall and sent the command through the tether. "Zeta, find me a safe place inside." The answer came not in words, but in certainty. Zeta dissolved into shadow and slipped over the wall. This time without restraint, the tether stretched farther than ever before, threading itself into the fifth sanctum, cold, hostile, and aware. Max inhaled once. Then he summoned the dead. Alpha rose first, bone plating locking into place with a sound like distant thunder. Beta followed blades, forming along its limbs. Gamma wrapped around Max's body, its armor sealing with a familiar, protective weight. Delta manifested in a soft pulse of restorative energy. Epsilon's arcane glow flared briefly before stabilizing. The team was whole. "Move," Max said. They climbed. No alarms sounded. No horns cried out. The wall did not resist them. Crossing into the fifth sanctum felt like stepping beneath water pressure, pressing in from all sides. Mana thick and sour. The air tasted wrong. Even Gamma's armor stiffened slightly in response. They reached the other side. Zeta waited in a collapsed structure, half-freed beneath warped stone and twisted metal, an old fortress or outpost long since claimed by corruption. The walls were thick, the angles broken, line of sight limited, defensible. Smart? Max nodded. Good work. Zeta faded back into the shadows, resuming its watch. Max surveyed the surroundings carefully. This place was different. The nightmare creatures here didn't wander aimlessly. They moved with purpose. Patrol patterns overlapped. Territory markers, scratches, residues, warped sigils were placed deliberately. These weren't beasts. They were factions. "They're organized?" Max said quietly. Epsilon pulsed in agreement, feeding him arcane readings. Delta's presence tightened, ready to respond. Alva shifted its stance, shield angled toward unseen threats. Max felt it then. Not a roar, not a charge. Attention. Something had been watching them since the moment they crossed the wall. Slowly, deliberately, a shape stepped into view beyond the broken structure. Tall, humanoid, wrapped in tattered flesh that barely concealed the chitin and bone beneath. Its eyes glowed with cold, knowing light. It smiled. "So," the nightmare said, voice layered and distorted, "the wall finally opens and sends this." Every skeleton turned as one. Max met the creature's gaze without flinching. His fear had been correct. In the fifth sanctum, the nightmares didn't just hunt. They observed, and one of them had decided that Max was worth stepping out of the shadows for. Chapter 28. A proposal from the abyss. The nightmare did not attack. That alone made Max uneasy. It stood a short distance away, tall and almost regal in its twisted form, humanoid, but wrong in ways that had nothing to do with claws or fangs. Bone and chitin were layered beneath stretched, pallid flesh, and its eyes burned with an intelligence that was far too calm for the fifth sanctum. It inclined its head. "Allow me to introduce myself," it said, its voice echoing as if spoken by several mouths at once. "You may call me thru." Every skeleton shifted. Alpha braced its shield. Beta angled its blades. Epsilon's arcane glow intensified. Delta's core pulsed in warning. Gamma tightened around Max's body. Zeta remained unseen but very present. Max did not raise a weapon. "You've been watching me," Max said flatly. Varkiel smiled. "Yes. From here." It tapped one clawed finger against the corrupted stone beneath its feet. "From the fifth sanctum, long before you ever scaled the wall." Max's eyes narrowed. "You sent creatures after me?" "Of course," Varkiel replied, almost cheerfully. "How else would one refine a weapon?" That word sent a chill through Max's spine. "I instructed lesser nightmares to test you, to harass you, to force adaptation." Its eyes gleamed. "You survived. You evolved. You cleared an entire sanctum." Varkiel spread its arms wide. "I am pleased with my work." Max clenched his jaw. "You manipulated lives. People died." "Yes." Varkiel agreed calmly. "And you saved far more." "That contradiction is why you are interesting," a third voice, cold and precise. "He has already altered the fourth sanctum beyond projections. Civilian resettlement, guild expansion, stability metrics increasing around his cleared zones. He was never meant to go that far," someone snapped. "Bonemancers were erased for a reason." The High Inquisitor turned toward the mirror. "Watching Max stand amid the dead, assisting him openly would expose us," they said, "and attempting to retrieve him now would likely fail." "So we observe?" a strategist asked. "Yes," the High Inquisitor replied after a long pause. "But not blindly." A glyph flared at the center of the chamber. "We will deploy one asset." Murmurs rippled through the council. "A spy. A guardian. An executioner?" "All of the above," the High Inquisitor said calmly. A shadow class awakened. "No contact unless necessary. No interference unless survival probability drops below threshold." "And if he destabilizes the fifth sanctum?" someone asked. The High Inquisitor's gaze hardened. "Then we learn whether he is a shield or at the beginning of something worse." The decision was sealed. Orders were issued. Seals unlocked. A figure long kept dormant stirred somewhere beyond the mirrors. Back in the fifth sanctum, Max stood facing a nightmare that smiled like it understood the world better than he did, and far above him, behind walls and watchers, the most powerful people left alive chose to do what they did best. Nothing. They would watch, and only when Max stood on the edge of death would they decide whether he was worth saving. Chapter 29. A proposal from the abyss. The nightmare did not attack. That alone made Max uneasy. It stood a short distance away, tall and almost regal in its twisted form, humanoid, but wrong in ways that had nothing to do with claws or fangs. Bone and chitin were layered beneath stretched, pallid flesh, and its eyes burned with an intelligence that was far too calm for the fifth sanctum. It inclined its head. "Allow me to introduce myself," it said, its voice echoing as if spoken by several mouths at once. "You may call me Varkiel." Every skeleton shifted. Alpha braced its shield. Beta angled its blades. Epsilon's arcane glow intensified. Delta's core pulsed warning. Gamma tightened around Max's body. Zeta remained unseen but very present. Max did not raise a weapon. "You've been watching me," Max said flatly. Varkiel smiled. "Yes. From here." It tapped one clawed finger against the corrupted stone beneath its feet. "From the fifth sanctum, long before you ever scaled the wall." Max's eyes narrowed. "You sent creatures after me." "Of course," Varkiel replied, almost cheerfully. "How else would one refine a weapon?" That word sent a chill through Max's spine. "I instructed lesser nightmares to test you, to harass you, to force adaptation." Its eyes gleamed. "You survived. You evolved. You cleared an entire sanctum." Varkiel spread its arms wide. "I am pleased with my work." Max clenched his jaw. "You manipulated lives. People died." "Yes," Varkiel agreed calmly. "And you saved far more. That contradiction is why you are interested." The nightmare took a step closer. "Tell me," Bonemancer did. "You ever wonder why I did not stop you? Why the fifth sanctum did not crush you the moment you approached?" Max didn't answer. "Because I need you," Varkiel continued. "There is another entity here, one far stronger than I, one that even the nightmares fear." The air seemed to grow colder. "It devours souls," Varkiel said quietly. "Not bodies, not mana. Souls themselves ripped apart, erased." Max's breath hitched despite himself. "A creature like that would annihilate my kind as easily as yours," Varkiel went on. "And yet, you're minions of bone." Its gaze fixed on Alpha. "No souls," it said softly. "No fear. No sustenance for it." Silence stretched. "You want me to fight it?" Max said. Varkiel nodded. "Together, if necessary, or simply as the blade I sharpened." Max felt something twist in his chest, not fear, but anger. "You think I'd help a nightmare?" Varkiel's smile widened, sharp and knowing. "I think you already have," it said. "Every monster you killed, every territory you claimed, every step closer you moved to this place." It leaned in, voice dropping. "Whether you accept or not, that creature will come for you eventually." The nightmare straightened. "I offer you knowledge, territory, and an enemy worthy of your growth." Max stood silent, the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Around him, his skeletons waited patient, loyal, soulless. Far away, unseen eyes from the first sanctum watched. And here, in the deepest ring of the dying world, a nightmare extended an alliance not born of mercy, but necessity. Chapter 30. The answer no blade could cut. Max's voice was calm. "What if," he said, "I kill you first, and then deal with the other creature myself?" The air shifted, not with fear but with amusement. Varkiel laughed. It was not loud, not mocking. It was the sound of something that had already walked through that possibility and found it. "Inadequate? You could try," Varkiel sighed, folding its arms, "and you might even succeed." Max's skeletons tensed instantly. Varkiel raised one clawed finger. "But then you would die." Max's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Varkiel gestured toward the corrupted skyline of the fifth sanctum. "That thing does not rule territory like I do. It does not patrol. It does not negotiate." Its voice dropped. "It waits." Max felt the pressure at the edge of his awareness as if something distant had briefly noticed him. "If you kill me," Varkiel continued, "my domain fractures, my watchers scatter. The seals I maintained weaken." "Seals?" Max asked. "Yes," Varkiel replied. "Crude ones. Imperfect. But enough to slow it." The nightmare's eyes glowed brighter. "And when those seals fail, it will come for you first." Max stayed silent. "You draw death like gravity," Varkiel sighed. "A Bonemancer commanding evolved dead inside the fifth sanctum is not subtle." It tilted its head. "You believe you could fight a soul killer alone?" Varkiel's smile faded not into fear, but something heavier. You have bones, it said. Excellent. Loyal. Empty. Then it tapped its own chest. But you still have a soul. Max felt Gamma tighten around him instinctively. That creature will not attack your minions first. Varkiel said quietly, it will go for you. One touch, one scream, and there will be nothing left to command the dead. Silence fell like a blade. So no, Varkiel. Finished. Killing me does not make your path easier. It stepped back, spreading its arms once more. It makes it shorter. Max exhaled slowly. This was not a threat. It was a calculation. Behind the nightmare's words, Max felt an uncomfortable truth settle in his bones. Varkiel was not asking for protection. It was buying time. And for the first time since crossing into the fifth sanctum, Max understood. This was not a fight between good and evil. It was a war of things that refused to die, and Max stood in the middle because he was the only one who commanded death itself. Varkiel did not answer immediately. That hesitation told Max more than any threat could have. The nightmare turned and traced a slow, deliberate pattern in the air. As it did, faint symbols old, warped sea hills flickered into existence, hovering like scars cut into reality itself. There is only one way, Varkiel said at last. Max felt Gamma tighten, Delta's core flare, and Epsilon's rune spin faster. You will anchor yourself to death, Varkiel continued. Not metaphorically, functionally. Max's jaw clenched. Explain. Explain. Varkiel's eyes burned with something close to respect. The soul killer cannot destroy what is not fully alive, it said. It consumes souls that exist wholly in the living state. It gestured toward Alpha and the others. Your minions are immune because they are already beyond that threshold. Max felt a chill crawl up his spine. You want me to become like them, he said. Not entirely, Varkiel replied. Enoug. Max wears a fully bodied skeleton armor. Alpha is a skeleton with a shield and spear. Beta is a skeleton with a bone bow. Delta is a skeleton healer. Epsilon is a skeleton mage. Gamma is a large skeleton with a large shield. Zeta is a shadow skeleton. The sigils rearranged themselves, forming a crude diagram of a human silhouette overlapped with skeletal structures. You already walked the edge, Varkiel said. Your class binds you closer to death than any living awakened. I would formalize it. How? Max demanded. Varkiel lowered its hand. A pact. The word hit harder than any attack. I will bind part of your soul to a death anchor. Within the fifth sanctum, Varkiel sighed. A phallic-like construct formed from your bones, mana, and the battlefield itself. Max's heartbeat thundered in his ears. If the soul killer strikes you, Varkiel continued, it will tear at your living essence and find resistance. Your soul will not be cleanly severed. And the cost? Max asked. Varkiel's smile returned thin, honest. You will never again be fully alive. Silence. You will feel less. Heal slower. Sleep poorly. Your emotions will dull over time. It tilted its head. You may even outlive everyone you wish to protect. Max swallowed. And you? He asked. I gain a weapon that survives. Varkiel replied simply. And time. Max looked down at his skeletal companions. They waited. They always waited. No fear. No doubt. No hesitation. He looked back up at the nightmare. So if I refused? Varkiel's gaze hardened. Then eventually, it said, the soul killer will come, and there will be nothing I can do to stop it from erasing you. Max closed his eyes. This was the price of standing where walls ended. Not glory, not thanks, but choosing how he would lose parts of himself so others wouldn't have to. When he opened his eyes again, there was steel in them. Tell me everything, Max said. Varkiel smiled, and somewhere far above, unseen watchers in the first sanctum leaned closer to their mirrors because something ancient had just offered a boy a way to survive by becoming something that should not exist.